Is this thing on? What the heck are my sunglasses? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Aaron. Buyer, seller, trader, collective aggregator. Welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things in the hobby. First things first, if you are going to be around on Thursday, Real Collectors, Fake Investors pod live stream with Jodo Jake. We were changing the time to 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Probably better for my health to go to bed early and to not have a stream that goes too late. So we're moving it up to 7 o'clock. I pitched to my wife. She agreed. We're in good shape. The trade-off, by the way, is gotta watch the baby, who's gonna put her down, and bath. Anyway, life's about compromises. Tune in then, links down below. Hope to see you there. Come on with your questions. And if you ask me investment advice, I will tell you, I will answer it. I promise. Maybe. We have a fun segment on investing. Anyway, um, and of course, if you like the channel and the content, leave a like. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Do the thing. Do the thing. Anyway, today we're going to talk about modern versus vintage, uh, the tale as old as time. David versus Goliath. Who's David? Who's Goliath? I'll let you decide that. Modern versus vintage, and I got this idea because there's a channel I watch. The guy's name is Sean, Reserve Investments, older gentleman. He's been doing collectibles and investing in collectibles for a very long time, but he is not what you think when I say investor into collectibles. You're probably thinking hype man, Pokemon, buy modern drops, buy, get MSRP drops, hoard, whatever. That's not the type of person. That's not the type of topic he talks about. He's been in the market for a long time. He has looked at all the different collectibles from video games and toys. He has some vintage Pokemon. I think he has some Magic comic books. Anyway, he's been around the block. He made a video. I think it was uploaded earlier this week, or maybe it was late last week, related to oftentimes people ask him questions, answer those questions. And the topic that he was talking about was, should you invest into vintage or modern Pokemon? And bear in mind, a lot of the sentiment around vintage versus modern, I think there's people who prefer vintage just because, from a fundamental standpoint, it seems to make sense that the things that are older and harder to find should do well in the longer term, and also because they're more rare and lower population. That the market value for these things should go up over time if there's enough demand, sufficient demand, right? And let me just tell a quick story about when I first got back into the hobby. This is 2020. I watched a gentleman on YouTube. His name is SM Pratt. Many of you have probably heard of him. If you haven't, you can check out his channel. He doesn't upload anymore. He only does Patreon exclusive videos. And he's been a long time collector, been around the block, been here forever. If you've been here for years, you know who he is. I learned so much just from watching his content and understanding how the old guard really approaches modern Pokemon. And in 2020, right, this is at a time where Sword and Shield first came out. We are before Evolving Skies came out. We are Vivid Voltage time, Darkness Ablaze time. There were no cards. The Moonbreon hadn't come yet, right? And as a result, like PSA 10 copies of the top chases, sure, you had like the abnormal kind of launch pushes with Champions Path Rainbow Charizard, Vivid Voltage Pikachu, which sold for like, I think that Rainbow Zard went for like more than 1,000, and Pikachu went for more than 1,000. And so, after the hype died down, a lot of these cards stabilized. And one of the sayings was, if you're gonna buy cards and you're investing cards, collect cards, you should really go after older, minter, rare, better. So older, the older it is; rare, the rarer it is; minter, the better condition it is; and then better, the better version. Anyway, the point is that like good condition old things are typically the best things to buy if you're purely looking at like the long term, um, you know, value of these things, right? So then we fast forward through time, and we get to Evolving Skies. Evolving Skies had the Umbreon VMAX, which we all know, pop 20, 30,000. I don't even know what it is these days. Number one card out of Sword and Shield era, number one card out of Scarlet and Violet era. It's still like the top, the creme de la creme, the top chase that everyone knows about and many people want. And it defied a lot of logic around the vintage versus modern debate, because before then, the cards that were expensive were not the modern cards, right? The cards that did well during COVID, many of them were not modern, many of them were vintage. And so, when we think about like long term now, and how do you build a collection or even or invest into something that you think is going to do well long term, the debate of modern versus vintage nowadays, it actually is very, it shouldn't be divisive. It kind of just depends, because one thing we found with graded population and graded cards is population doesn't really matter if there's sufficient demand. And obviously, this is like a I'll try to explain this concept as simply as I can. It's pretty straightforward. If there's more demand than supply, then market value will probably go up for whatever it is that you're buying. If there's more supply than demand, then uh, as more people sell that card or list that card, they're probably going to undercut each other, and that's going to lower market price, right? That's a very simple way of explaining the economics around cards. And I think when you're new, you're probably looking at pop reports as I'll use a good example. Basic math. Looking at a pop report and saying, "Oh, it has less pop 10 gem rates, whatever you want to call it, less in circulation." I think that means this card's going to do better. That's essentially understanding addition and subtraction, right? I'll give a good comparison. When you first learn math, the easiest thing to learn is addition and subtraction. Okay, it's a very objective way to look at a single number and to understand exactly what it means. Now, when you start to get in the hobby a bit more, right, you start to learn that pop, the population of things, isn't always the deciding factor for market price, um, and that demand factors into that. Then you start getting into multiplication division, right? You start thinking a little bit more broadly. So you're a math student, you're in like the first grade, you start learning multiplication division. Now you start to stack the reasoning and understanding for how uh, uh, card populations work and how market prices affect it, okay? And I would say most people in the hobby, again, I'm just projecting what I think, are in the I just learned multiplication division part of mathematics, like the comparison, right? Most people still operate in this way where they're like, oh, well, there's more supply. Oh, that means that this market price is going to go down if demand doesn't go up. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's probably the easiest way to understand if what you're buying is actually worth holding or worth selling, is just seeing how much of the Moonbreon or Giratina or the Leafeon or Umbreon or Umbreon V or Rayquaza, whatever. It's a simple way of just tracking and understanding, is this card a good buy? Is there upside in me buying this card today versus tomorrow or months from now or years from now? Okay. Now, here's where it gets interesting. And all my science buffs and mathematics buffs will understand what I'm getting at. If you stayed in school, hopefully you did, and you learned about calculus, right? Or let's say with the sciences, physics, right? That's when a lot of the, you know, the logic, a lot of the brain power that you need to use to understand um, how those arts, how those sciences work, it it requires a high level of investment and understanding of how those sciences work and mathematics work. So in physics, right, it's not just the distance, it's not just the height that you're trying to calculate. You have to factor in things like temperature, wind, maybe gravitational pull. And these are all variables, right, on a day to day basis that change. So, unless you're given a set group of variables that are destined to not change, which in real life obviously is impossible, right? I can't project how far I'm going to throw a ball today versus tomorrow because so many variables come into play: the temperature, the wind, am I hurt? Uh, whatever, right? My point is, that's how you should think about vintage versus modern in those markets, is that at any point in time, depending on what's going on in the industry, what's going on with the economic conditions of the world, what's going on with um, what people are doing in the streaming operations, what are the whales consolidating into, these are all variables that contribute to which era of cards is going to do better, right? For a long, long time, let me go back to Sun and Moon and GX cards, right? And tag team. Many of those PSA 10s up until this last boom, so beginning of this year, right? In PSA 10 and come on, buddy. Yeah, why are you cutting me off, buddy? Yes, you saw me merge. Why are you cutting me off? Many of those cards in PSA 10. By the way, let me just explain this real quick. If you're driving on the highway and you see someone merging, let them merge. Why would you try to cut them off if you see them merge? Anyway, sorry, said right. Many of those cards, PSA 10, were 100, 200, 300 bucks, right? You're probably saying, well, you know, in hindsight, you should have bought them all. In hindsight, like, it was so obvious. Those cards sat and sat and sat. And I'm talking about really good cards like the Mewtwo and Mew GX, Umbreon and Darkrai, Pikachu and Zekrom. Like the tag team cards today that are pushing, I mean, many of them are 800, 900, 1,000 plus dollars, right? These cards, if you ask the old guard in years past, there'd be no way. There'd be no way that these cards would be worth more than vintage cards, right? Or mid era cards. And lo and behold, we fast forward to today, many of these cards are worth more in a PSA 10 than vintage cards, E Series cards, Rocket cards. The list goes on and on and on. And the point I'm trying to illustrate is like the question of modern versus vintage, or the topic of modern versus vintage, doesn't need to be refuted. It shouldn't even be talked about because what matters is where is the market going and what is going on today. One of the other things that I looked at for a long time was gold stars. And at the top of the year, I made a very aggressive play into many different gold stars across English and Japanese. And I remember because I was vending in, man, this must have been in January or February. I sold, I don't know how much I sold, but I left, I spent everything I sold that weekend and I bought 8 or 9 gold stars, I believe, from various conditions from 3 to 6, 7, whatever. Okay. And 2 of the cards I bought Rayquaza 6.5 BGS Gold Star, Rayquaza 7.5 BGS Gold Star, and then Charizard Gold Star 5.5. I have a picture. If I have the picture, I'm going to show it on screen or in the thumbnail. Anyway, point is, I bought all these gold stars, right? And for the longest time, I had always heard, gold stars are it. Gold stars are what you need to be buying and holding. They are gonna be the blue chips. They are worth investing in. They're the best cards to buy. Like you should buy them because if you don't, you're gonna miss out. I heard this literally since day one coming back in the hobby, right? However, the market did not back up these claims. And obviously hindsight is 2020. Everything is so obvious in hindsight. But there are people who have been buying gold stars and squatting in them for years, right? And many of them, obviously older than modern cards, did not appreciate that much. I remember my Rayquaza Gold Star 6.5. I bought at about 3,000. I sold it at like 3,600. And keep in mind, 20% is pretty damn good. I auctioned that off with ZNG, Shadow James. And I was on cloud nine. Could not believe I had an easy 20% flip from a show. I had a play in mind. It worked out. I bought the thing, and whoever bought it is a sucker because I sold it over comps and I did well. Okay. And then I got my Rayquaza 7.5. Same show, same mechanics, same everything. Did the same thing. I think it sold for like 4,500. I paid, I believe, 3,600 or maybe a little bit less than that. So that's about 25%. Oh man, so good. I just crushed it. I sold it's not necessarily vintage, an old card. Um, it's a gold star. I made my profit, totally killed it, you know. And all these guys talking about how vintage and older cards are going to do better. Like, they might as well just take the profits. They don't know what they're talking about. Like, it has not been proven yet that vintage is better, right? Or, sorry, the consensus for me at least is like, it's not true. Vintage is not always better. You know what happened in the last 5-6 months? I sold that thing in February, both those, and these are the cards. Rayquaza Gold Star in a 7.5 literally sold for about 10,000 more dollars than what I sold it for. Let me pull up the comps on the screen just so you know I'm not blowing smoke up your butt. $10,000. Now you're probably saying, you are a moron. At times I think I am. My point in talking about all this is there is no hard and fast rule about vintage, modern, this or that, because there's so many things that could change and so many variables at play. Crypto coming in, right? The world economy, the US dollar getting weaker, um, gold and silver doing well. All these factors that come into play that it really discriminates any previous logic we had around, of course, this type of card, this era of a card is going to perform best. And if you haven't been paying attention to Pokemon over the last 6 to 8 months, vintage has also been on a tear. Not expected, because we had our heights during COVID and they tapered down, and now we're doing it again. And so I think what I'm trying to illustrate at the end of the day is not for you to learn physics or calculus. I mean, physics is hard. I'll be honest. Calculus is not that hard, but it's really just to preach, like, be on your toes at all times and do the research. I don't think many people expected for there to be a consolidation into vintage. A lot of the smart money, as what we call them, a lot of people with bags of money who are coming in, they're the ones I like to think, that are moving a lot of the market price up for the older stuff because they have the money to, but also because if you're going to be buying something at the end of the day and your time horizon is unlimited, right? Meaning you have a lot of money. Why would you buy the higher pop uh why would you buy the more let me figure out how to frame this. Why would you buy the higher pop card, right, for the same price when you can buy the rarer thing and you can just wait and wait and wait until it appreciates? And I think at the end of the day, that's probably what happened, is more money coming in. Some of it probably was manipulate the markets and the cards. Let's not get into that. But when you have people who are willing to spend a lot of money and they have nothing to lose, and their time horizons are, I'm gonna buy this Grail, I want to buy this Gold Star, Mew, PSA 9, and just hold on to it. That's the stuff that drives card values up. And as a result, the older stuff, the the blue chips, right? The the stuff that was slept on, I don't know why I'm doing air quotes all the time. What's wrong with me? The stuff that was underappreciated for a long time, it's now getting more attention, right? I think in the past, the challenge with vintage and modern was every time a new set came out, all the marketing, all the YouTube, all the content, all the social media, nobody's talking about the older stuff, right? Pokemon's incentivized to get people excited about the brand, and they do that through the mechanisms that they create, which are usually modern cards, and they want to sell new product. They're not trying to sell things that are out of print. And so every new user who comes in, every person who came back because of Evolving Skies or 151, all the eras in between, Black and White, X and Y, Sun and Moon, right? Um, mid era slash EX era, all the sets in between, they're not getting the love, any attention or love, right? And so the only exposure that you're banking on is someone going to drum up some level of awareness on these older cards. And typically that's not the case. But that's how it used to be, right? Now, I think with all this money coming in, they're just deciding, you know what? I'm going to buy a very low pop card that I can make a market for because there's only 5 in population or 5 in circulation, and I could buy one for 1,000 and sell it for and list it for like 2,000. I have a friend. Shout out Tyler. CeeLo collects. Many of us in the Bay know him. Love this guy. Love his assortment. Love his cards. I'll link his Instagram down below. He specializes, or maybe he prefers, to buy low pop cards of things that you probably saw as a kid and just passed on. And some examples: the Landorus and Tornadus and Thunderous from Black and White. Those cards. Where's my sunglasses? Just threw them somewhere. Those cards, those full art cards from Black and White. He has them. He sells them, right? That random cracked ice blister promo from like XY era in a PSA 10 that's like pop 8. He has those. Reverse stamp hollow, reverse hollow stamp from Delta Species PSA 10 of a, what is it, Grovyle? Grovyle? The middle evolution of oh my god, what's that Pokemon's name? Trico? Yeah, he has it. Or whatever stamp that was. Like, that's the stuff that he specializes in. And I love it because he actually moves that stuff. People eat that stuff up, right? And, you know, it wasn't until recently, the last year, 2 years, that stuff actually moved. Many of those cards weren't really that popular. And they also were not in circulation that much. And so they kind of stayed stagnant. The price points were like several hundreds, maybe sub 1,000. And like, it was an example of like, just because these cards are low pop doesn't mean people actually want them. Doesn't mean there's a market for them. But that changed. And then a lot of this is changing very quickly. What we used to believe was true, and it was a hard truth around vintage and modern, is changing. And with the streaming operations driving a lot of sell through, with people grading like crazy, with people chasing modern alternate arts, it's created a lot of this new, I don't want to say erratic behavior, but it's changed how much you can predict what is going to do well in the hobby. And so, going back to modern versus vintage, it's not really a debate anymore. It really depends on what are you talking about and at what point in time. See, if I had it my way, all right, I think someone asked this question like in the first or second episode of our live stream. Would you rather have a $5,000 vintage card or 5 $1,000 modern cards? I'm pretty sure Jake agreed with me. I said 5 $1,000 modern cards. And the reason being is the sell through, I can at least guarantee to be high. A $5,000 vintage card, right? It could stay $5,000 or go less or go up for a long time, right? And for a long time, I mean like years, right? You would have to find a specific buyer for that card. And you have to hope that there's a market for that card in order for it to continue to go up. And one thing I've learned about the price points, which I talk about a lot, is once you get into the 2, 3, 4, 5K plus mark, like there aren't hundreds of people or thousands of people trying to spend that much money. Most people are buying within like the sub $1,000 range, right? So, that's just an example of like it's not actually clear sometimes, vintage versus modern. It really depends what you're talking about and what is the circumstance. Truthfully, though, for me, if I was a collector nowadays and I was trying to park money, so I'm not thinking about sell through, I'm not thinking about making money, I would probably hold um, something in between. Maybe like a split it up into a $2,500 vintage card and then $2,500 of modern cards. I would switch it up or be in between somewhat, somehow. But man, it I think depending on who you ask too, the answer won't be the same. It really depends. What card are we talking about? What point in the market? Are we talking about now? Are we talking about last year before Surging Sparks came out? All these things factor into this topic. One thing I would say that hasn't changed or doesn't change, or probably I don't want to say will never, has a very high likelihood of not changing, is sealed. The older sealed, I believe, I truly have conviction in this, even though I don't hold anything older than X and Y. X and Y? Yeah, I have Japanese X and Y. X and Y. The older stuff will always do better. Yeah, it doesn't mean the sell through is going to be higher, but if I had to choose between buying a box of, does anyone know where my sunglasses went? I seriously, what is wrong with me? If I had to choose between a modern Pokemon set that's not Evolving Skies or 151 and a X and Y, black and white, fire red leaf green era, equivalent value, right? So multiple of the modern boxes to equate the older boxes. I think it'd be the same answer. If I was a collector, it'd be the older stuff. But if I was trying to optimize for sell through, it'd be the newer stuff. That said, I think everything is changing, honestly. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that as there are very few hard and fast rules on the hobby these days. Again, the exception is sealed. It does well over time, depending on what time frame you're talking about. But everything else, like, I think this is where I will go on to talk about and preach genuine curiosity. When you start to learn these things and you start to figure out, like, is this a good buy? What's the sell through of this card? If I hold this vintage card, if I spend $3,000 on this card that I really like, that's from EX era, is that a good buy if I want to collect and I want it to go up in value? Like, I think a lot of the times the shortcut way of doing this is just asking someone who's an expert, air quotes. I would air quote right now, but I don't feel like it. But at the end of the day, like, this is stuff that if you're gonna spend that much money, you gotta learn. Because no one can make you feel good about your decisions permanently. People can give you the short term dopamine, I agree with you. But when you have that conviction, you really have done the research and understand the impact and the risks with your decision making, it feels damn good. And um, I would hope if you're spending that much money in the hobby, that's what you're doing. Damn, 28 minutes. Pretty good. That's all I got for you guys. Just want to say I appreciate the support. I don't really know, man. The channel does well. I just record in my car. It kind of just works itself out. Somehow I'm able to talk myself for half an hour and not be tired and bored. I don't know. I appreciate the support more than you know. Let me know your thoughts. Drop a comment, feedback, like, whatever. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.